Season 4 of the beloved Bridgerton series on Netflix is upon us. While I am yet to finish watching part 1, here's some interesting things I recently found out about the town in real life. So before I go into this video, I want to put a disclaimer on the fact that there will be some a little bit of some heavy topics or a heavy topic covered in this video or in this recording. So I want you guys, I implore you, just as a creator, just to stay and listen to the heavier parts of it, just because it's important that every human know about the history of some things and reflect on how that history impacts their current life and gives you an outlook to see, has the world really changed in some ways or hasn't it? Are we just experiencing muted versions of something that our predecessors, our ancestors, or whatever experienced like at a fuller capacity? So without further ado, let me just continue with what I was saying. So there are a few questions that I wanted to ask, and the first thing is, who are the Ton? So in Catherine Curzon's book Inside the World of Bridgerton, the author describes the Ton as the highest of high society in the regency era. In a previous video that I had done, I actually talked about who was like the most eligible bachelor in Bridgerton, especially in season 1, and I kind of went through the ranks of nobility, and we discovered that it was indeed the Duke of Hastings. If you haven't watched that video, please go over and just give it a quick watch. I learned so much from that the research that I did that went into creating that video. If this is something that you're curious about, as I was, I think that video will be helpful. I will cover some ranking systems again in this book, but I won't go in depth as I did in that video that I am referring to. So what were the classes of the Ton? So at the apex, at the very top of this prominent social class, was the royal family, which consisted of the monarch. At that time, it was King George III and his queen, which was Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, and other members of the royal family. So in this particular regency era, their son, King George the Fourth, who later on was the reigning monarch at a certain point where his father was mentally incapacitated, he took over, but he was like the prince regent. That those people particularly were the ones who were at the very top. And then you have the peerage, which were the nobility, and they were the core of the Ton, comprising of individuals with hereditary titles. And in this peerage, ancestry really mattered a lot. Like your bloodline sealed you in the nobility for a long time, if not forever, as long as the regency was in effect. And the rank in order of precedence were the Duke, and I'll only mention like the male parts. Actually, let me name the female counterparts as well. The Duke, a Duchess. Next was the Marquess, followed by or a Marchioness, the Earl or a Countess. Then the fourth was a Viscount or a Viscountess, and the fifth was a Baron or a Baroness. So the third in rank was the landed gentry, or as we know it, upper class. So these people owned large estates or hamlets and often held local positions of power. So how these landed gentry generated their income was through rent. A lot of them had, as we know, they had a large estate, so they collected rent from their tenants, which were farmers. So, and they also got rent from lucrative rights to fishing, shooting, or hunting on their grounds. So you have like kind of like two categories of landed gentry. One are the untitled aristocrats, for example, esquires or gentlemen. And someone mentioned somewhere, I forgot to, oh, I think it was historicalemporium.com. They said that an example of an esquire or gentleman that we know from period pieces or books, like period pieces in movies or books, would be Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, in Jane Austen's book. And then we have the titled aristocrats. So an example would be a baronet who earned this title from by hereditary. It was a hereditary title, but they were not part of the peerage. So these titles were granted usually by a monarch, and a baronet would be below a baron but above a knight. And a knight was a title given for honorary service, usually by a monarch, or in some cases popes, for serving their country, a church, or the monarchy. If you're interested in doing your own personal research, I got a lot of these things from nobilitytitles.net and historicalemporium.com. And then we have the fourth class, and they were the wealthy non-land owners. Also, like, they were on the fringe of le bon ton. So traditionally, the ton comprised of people with inherited land or titles. However, by the Regency era, immensely wealthy professionals such as merchants, bankers could buy their way into certain elite social circles and be a lower ranking member of the ton. So if anybody who's watching this video would like me to do like a much more detailed video on, you know, the ton, and kind of go into a deep dive on these different titles, if it's something that interests you, please let me know in the comments. If not, we can keep it pushing. So what influence did the ton have over society? So I really didn't do a deep dive into this because currently I am reading the book Inside the World of Bridgerton, and it's really interesting. So I'm yet to understand the breadth of the influence that they had, but on a superficial level, based on my knowledge on the show, like through Lady Whistledown's paper, we know like the influence of society through fashion, manners, and also like the social life. So it was a very strict class system where rules actually mattered, and if you fall out because of scandals or not behaving as was expected, in some cases you could be kicked out. Like we see how Lady and Lord Sheffield were kind of like they went into self-exile because Lady Sharma, Edwina and Kate's mom, married someone from outside the country, a foreigner who wasn't a noble person. So it was actually that serious. Then something interesting that I asked is, did members of the ton work? Remember in season 3 where Mr. and Mrs. Mondridge come into the ton because their son has now inherited the title of baron from someone's great aunt or so. And I was very curious as to why Lady Danbury was insisting that Mr. Mondrich, after working so hard in his boxing and collecting his monies and like establishing a business, why that was looked down upon, and why Lady Danbury was saying, hey, if you want to get in good with the Queen, you have to shut that whole thing of owning a bar down. You cannot work. And I was like, that is such a topsy-turvy world, because in our current society, businessmen, entrepreneurs and stuff like that, those are the people who make money and are regarded highly in our society. But it was not so in the Regency era. So as I was reading in the book by Catherine Curzon, Inside the World of Bridgerton, she says that most gentlemen with titles and members of the ton were born into the position, usually. And they did not work for a living. Like, they didn't work for an income, especially they did not do any form of like manual labor, like doing your 9 to 5. Not so doing your 24/7 for entrepreneurs and such. Nope. Rent. How did they earn their money? So as we covered, rent, if you were a landowner or you held property, you owned property. Other ways were through good investments, annuities, and something called an honorarium. I will not go into these individual sources of income. Again, if you want me to cover this in another video, if you're interested, drop it in the comments. Let me know. Are you interested in knowing how people in the world of Bridgerton, earned their money? Because these guys are partying day after day, month upon month. There's this famous Ugandan song that goes party after party after party after party. So it's like that's the life they were living, but like they were living like it was December every day for 6 months. So now that we've covered that, my final question was there truly diversity in the ton, like in real life? And this is the part where it gets heavy, this is the part where it gets deep, but let's just get into it. So I read this article by Jessica Brain from historicuk.com, and the title was Abolition of Slavery in Britain. So by the time of the Regency era, there were enslaved people in the British Empire, in British colonies. So for that reason, I think that there wouldn't be that much representation, that much visibility in, the world of lords and ladies. And of course, there is the question of like Queen Charlotte, and did she have African ancestry and all of that. Regardless, she was a monarch, and she was of nobility from Germany. But then anyways, according to this article, the conclusion that I came to was that real life ton was not as diverse as seen in Britain. Up until 1807, it was illegal to purchase enslaved peoples in the British Empire. But the practice of slavery was still practiced and legal in the British Caribbean, and I will put an asterisk there, and in other colonies. Then that Slave Trade Act from 1807 outlawed the trade of slaves, but not the practice of slavery itself. And a lot of enslaved people came to be in the possession of these lords, ladies, these people, the higher social elite. So the lords and ladies and dukes and duchesses and barons and what have you, all these earls, a lot of them had enslaved people. Remember, the Regency era, which the Bridgerton is in like late 18th century, early 19th century. So there was a Slavery Abolition Act in 1833, and it was a bill that was received royal assent. So I was like, what's royal assent? And royal assent is a method by which a monarch formally approves an act of the legislature, either directly or through an official acting on the monarch's behalf. So this was enacted by King William IV under the government of Earl Grey on August 28th, 1833. Pardon me. So this is past the world of Bridgerton, because I remember when I was looking at like the Julia Quinn book, I've forgotten the title, the one which is Penelope and Colin's season. It was around 1811, I think. So 1833 from 1811. Think about it. So are you really seeing that many people in the town that are people of color, or black people, or Asian people? I can't really speak for the Asian community like that. I can't speak for other people of color, but I know for black people, you ain't seeing them like that. They were few and far between. Okay, so then I went into a deep dive, and I was like, this law, the Slavery Abolition Act, even though it was given royal assent in 1833, it came into effect in August 1st August 1834. So slaves, and then the caveat, slaves below the age of 6 were freed in the colonies. Those over 6 were redesignated as apprentices, and their servitude gradually was abolished in 2 stages. First set of apprenticeships ended in 1st August 1838, and the final set in 1st August 1840. The act excluded the territories in the possession of the East India Company, or to the island of Ceylon, I hope I'm saying that right, or to the island of St. Helena. These exceptions were eliminated in 1843 with the Indian Slavery Act in 1843. So you can see that the abolition of slavery across the British colonies or across the British Empire, it took a really long time. And by the way, as I was going into this rabbit hole, it took decades. It didn't just start in 1807. It started years before that. And I didn't want to go into that because I'm not doing a video on the abolition of slavery in the UK. I'm just doing a video on covering on some aspects of the Bridgerton, but then I'm setting it against the parallel of real life as well. So then it goes deeper. The act provided for compensation to slave owners, but not to the enslaved. That was like the condition on which these enslaved people who were there against their own will, that's the only way they could be freed. That hit me hard. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was so sad, because you think, yes, okay, of course, we always ask for reparations for everything that people's ancestors went through, but then now to see that the reverse actually happened, that was shocking to me. I never expected it. And the amount of money spent on the payments, this information, I got it from Wikipedia, was set at 20 million pound sterling as business assets to the registered owners of freed slaves. That was equal to 40% of the Treasury's annual income at the time. So the government of England had to get loans from some people. You can do the research on your own, but then it was able to pay 5 million sterling pounds out of pocket, which is the equivalent today of 1.5 billion sterling pounds. So that is the 5 million which was taken. What about the remaining 15 million pounds? If you just do everything, That's like in our currency. I hope I'm not wrong, and correct me if I am. 6 billion sterling pounds was compensated to slave owners for the freeing of enslaved people. Let that sink in. Anyway, some people who I think I have to mention, because this is Black History Month, and there's people who played such a big role in England in making sure that there was an anti-slavery. These are the people who are part of the anti-slavery association in England, who played a big part in moving, in lobbying this bill to become a law. And I think I should just mention them. For anyone who's interested in going down that rabbit hole, in knowing about their history, here are their names: Joseph Sturge, Henry Brougham, Thomas Foxwell Baxton, Elizabeth Hayrick, Mary Lloyd, Jane Smeal, Elizabeth Pease, and Anne Knight. And other names of 10 key figures in the abolition of slavery in the UK. These are the names I got from an article from historyhit.com, written by Luke Tomes, and they are the famous William Wilberforce, Granville Sharp, James Ramsey, Josiah Wedgwood, William Grenville, John Newton, James Stephen, Thomas Clarkson, and Olaudah Equiano, and he was from the Kingdom of Benin, which is present-day Nigeria, and he was 11 years old when he was captured and enslaved. And Ignatius Sancho, who was born into slavery on a slave ship that was bound to Grenada, and he was a slave for 18 years. He was an enslaved person for 18 years. So since he was 2 years old, he was an enslaved person. And I would like to just mention these two people in case you never heard their name: Ignatius Sancho and Olaudah Equiano, as people that we need to commemorate in this Black History Month. So happy Black History Month. Make sure you guys stay educated and you get to learn and appreciate the people who were allies and the people who also made something of themselves as Black people from the continent of Africa, and also championed a lot of the names of the people that I have mentioned. They were very accomplished Black people after they had gotten their slavery. But let me not say after, let me say the entirety of a person's life, whether you're an enslaved person or not, your life matters and your potential is limitless. So just value your fellow human beings, even if you're not of the same race as them, and support each other even though you're not the same race as them. So anyways, this was my breakdown. I'm done with the heavy part, and I really loved getting to just dive into these things, and it made me appreciate Bridgerton even more, because it made the world that wasn't possible then possible now, not only for the viewers, but it brought representation, and it made representation very much more meaningful. Okay, that's my cue to go. See you on the next one.